Hey guys, and welcome back to another Conan Exiles video. Today we are back on the Exile lands in map square B13 at the Carrow Moor waypoint, and we are building an Aesir Ring Fort designed for PvE gameplay. The requirements for this build are on screen now, feel free to screenshot if you need to. So without further ado, let's get started. As you've probably already seen from the title, this is indeed a speed build, as this fort took quite a long time to construct. As I do with my other speed builds, I'll talk through my ideas and inspirations, alongside the building process itself, any difficulties I encountered, and finally we will take a cinematic fly through the finished build at the end. The beginnings of this build were pretty unexpected. I hadn't built anything up in the frozen north for a while, and I felt like doing so I flew around for a little bit looking for a good spot to hopefully think up something decent. I stumbled upon Carrow Moor, which is little more than just a few concentric stone rings. However, that shape kinda got me thinking, and I ended up pretty quickly coming up with the idea of a circular base, much in the same fashion as those stone rings, with an exterior retaining wall and then an interior keep that kind of rises up in tiered steps with a balcony on each level, almost like rings, hence the name Ring Fort. This concept isn't entirely dissimilar to some of the examples of real-life ring forts, so they were typically not elevated in tiers from my understanding, and instead were mostly just fortified circular settlements, as opposed to this design, which actively rises with those rings. My main reason for choosing Aesir was, of course, the fortified walls. This design could work with some other sets in the north, but I envision this build with gently sloping walls, and well, there's only two real solutions for that: Aesir and Pyramid. Pyramid walls are a little too short and wouldn't fit the biome, so Aesir became the default choice, with Frontier used for fencing some areas on both the interior and the exterior. Jumping into the building process itself, it began fairly simple. The exterior wall isn't actually perfectly round, as I kinda wanted it to follow the flow of the natural walls from Carrow Moor. It was something of a success, though I did have to create more of an oval than a circle, though I don't really think that's of any real detriment to the build. It still serves well as a retaining barrier. As for the actual fort on the interior, the concept was really simple, and that was to have the floors rise up, step back, and repeat. You saw in the base plate earlier that I dropped down a central circular section on the ground floor. That wasn't just to make things more interesting. It's also going to double up as a useful way to pass stability upward. Looking at a circular base plate this size, anyone can tell you that stability will become a problem in this design. So by having walls at roughly the halfway point of the circle to hold up the floor above and pass up a source of 100 stability, life gets a lot easier. Thanks to this, I actually had very few stability issues, even for a build of this size. The main problem I had though was just trying to make the build look visually interesting on the interior. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can take this, and I personally ended up using roof pieces during the decoration phase to smooth out the harsh transition between the walls. When the base is built up, it's surprisingly plain on the interior before and even somewhat after decoration, so having features like that, small as they may be, are pretty important for making the interior more visually interesting. Actually decorating this build was an interesting task, as there was a fair amount of space to fill, meaning I could be a bit more liberal with including the larger crafting stations or multiple of the more useful ones. I also even managed to fit the biggest wheel of pain in, which honestly slotted really nicely into that lowered middle section. I really didn't want to go over the top with the more roleplay focused decoration, as this is a PvE build, but I've added some where it felt appropriate. This build also has a ton of storage and room for even more depending on how you wanted to configure the available space. I also purge tested this base, and given the size, I will admit, I was a little apprehensive as to if the purge would actually work. It turns out, it does. I tested this on purge levels 1, 5 and 10, with the treasure coffer on the ground floor, both in the central step down section and in the rear staircase room, and to be honest, both places seemed fine. If you do purges back to back off cooldown, and especially if you're able to clear them really quickly, there is a chance the camp will spawn across the mountain to the south, I believe, if the closer spawn points are not available. That purge seems almost guaranteed to fail, as they just can't reach the base in time. That being said, this spawn location seems like a backup if the 2 or 3 main locations are not available. Unfortunately, they are all reasonably close to the base. They were close enough where the pressure is kept up by the purge, but not so close that they're right on top of you, and at some points they were even fighting up the hill towards the base, so that was also a pretty cool visual. I'll be perfectly honest, I did very little planning for this build, but in the end, I think it all came together pretty well. That about wraps up all I have to say for the Ring Fort. As usual, I will let the rest of the construction phase play out so you can follow along, and then we'll take a cinematic fly through the finished and furnished build to see how everything's laid out and the sheer amount of utility you can fit into this fort. I've got a few larger builds in mind, but if you have any suggestions of your own, big or small, grand or modest, as always I would love to hear them. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. Take care, and I'll see you soon.
Mm-hmm.